Hey there, welcome back to the table. So as you can see, I got a camera set up, this time face down. One of the key things though is I can't get the whole map. I mean, I can, but then I'd be zoomed so far out that you can't see anything real well. I'm already a little disappointed with how hard it is to read the different hex numbers, but this is the Soviet EWR and this is the front line. So the Soviets are off in that direction. Okay, so I'll switch to the other camera by doing this. And I know this one, it's a nice camera and all, but the angle, is a little weird, looking at it from this perspective. But here over here, you can see that's where the Soviets are, and there's the front line. So that little corner there is not on the other camera, but I don't see us doing a lot of action over there. So I'm going to we'll make do. How about that? So this is a weird part of the game, and I know Dennis in particular. I'm going to call you out. I know you've played this game several times. You've been commenting in the comment section for me. So just a question, because I've been trying to find the answer to this. Right here it says the scenario ends at the end of turn 15. At that point, roll for a recovery for all flights that you have not yet recovered. I'm assuming that a turn in this case is, because elsewhere, actually, I might have answered the question, so I may not need you here. So the rule book says that if a flight were to take its path, so it enters on the ingress, it takes its flight path, and then it exits. Like when that happens, the scenario ends. So we wouldn't go to turn 15 in that case. I think the 15 is just some number because in case somehow, for whatever reason, it takes 15 turns to enter the map, take some pictures, and exit. So I think that part's fine. Here's the part where I'm a little wonky, and you could still help with this. So the scenario says it's May 12th, 1987, but over here on the ground setup, it says on the 15th through 17th of May, roll for Gepard capability. Well, it's May 12th. So how do I get to May 15th? By doing turns. Because a turn is going to be just an hour or something like that. I don't think this is days. It doesn't take days to fly over Eastern Germany and, into Western Germany. I mean, this is what, Lübeck, and I mean, these cities are, my gosh, you could probably drive between these cities back in a Model T Ford in a couple hours, let alone, flying a jet. So that's the thing that I'm confused about, is I don't understand how time works in this game. I tried to look it up, and I'm not finding much. Okay, so with that said, let's get going. I know some of you are itching to see how this plays. So player aid 4 is the thing you need. This part at the top is for the scenario setup. We went through that in the last video. And so the very first thing we do is we're in the random event phase. But the thing with the random event phase is that you skip it on the first turn, and it even tells you that. Thank you, GMT. Well done. So we don't do any random events on the first turn. So we're going to move straight to the jamming phase, which I read once. I need to reread again. So we're going to go slow through this. And I know I'm starting to speak slower too. Apologize for that. But basically, I want to make sure I take this one step at a time. This rulebook is way too big for me to just memorize. And so I think we're just going to experience how this plays out, and we'll go through it section by section. So with that being said, I'm going to move the marker over there because we're on the second phase of the turn. And then I'm going to refresh myself on this this jamming phase, and I'll be right back. So yeah, I'm 4 minutes into the video and I'm already pausing, but that's how this video is going to go, folks. So I hope you don't mind. Hey, welcome back. All right, I know for me it was about 15-20 minutes here. So this jamming phase is very confusing, but I think I understand it, And my conclusion is we skip this. So here, I'll explain to you my logic. First of all, it's like several pages long, but you know, it explains a basic bit about jamming strengths. So there's standoff jamming, which is cumulative, and then there's defensive jamming. Now, defensive jamming is just done by any plane, and the Russian plane here has a defensive jammer. You can see it says 3D here. So it's a value of 3, and the D means it's defensive. It could possibly be an N for noise, but so it has a defensive jammer. But here's the thing: this particular phase it is the jamming phase, and it says each player, NATO first, places or adjusts standoff or spot jamming markers. Okay. This is not defensive jamming. It's standoff and spot. All right, so the rest of this, standoff and spot jamming, is in this section. And you need to have planes that are dedicated to jamming. So, for example, I found, for the Americans, the C-130 here, or EC-130, so electronic countermeasures, right? That's what the EC stands for. So right here, you can see it has a little switch. It says stand or jam. So, or standoff jam, actually, is what that says. I thought that was a switch. But, you know, like this was up, that was down, and this was off. But it's a standoff jam. So it actually has the ability to jam radars. And that's the sole purpose of this plane. And then the Russians have actually several of these. There's an Su-24. They're real easy to find because they got this little standoff jam written on them. So the MiG-25 Foxbat can have a standoff jammer. There's several of them, in fact. The Russians have quite a few compared to the Americans. There's the AN-12PP, the Cub, the Tu-22, the Su-24 Fencer. I think that's it. Now, I didn't check the other countries to see if they had standoff jammers, but I just assumed that the Americans and the Russians for sure. Well, here you go. The British have one. The Falcon 20 has a standoff jammer. So anyways, there you go. That's the Germans. The Hansa jet has one. We definitely needed more than one because Americans only have one, which I highly doubt is realistic, but maybe back in the 80s it was. And for those of you who really understand the history behind this, feel free to enlighten me in the column or in the comments. Weren't the Growlers around at this time? And why aren't the Growlers represented in this? Is that EC-130 a Growler plane? Because I thought the Growler was a form of a Hornet. Or is that just a Navy thing and this is more of an Air Force game? That might be where I'm getting confused. But I know there's Growlers out there. At least in 1987, I'm pretty sure there were, or at minimum, Prowlers, right? So there's Prowlers and Growlers. So anyways, if you can just educate me on that, I'm just curious. But anyways, back to this. The planes would have escort jamming duty is what their role would be. And then what they get to do is they get to drop these little markers. And it has like a imaginary arc. And what that does is it'll jam, you know, the radar from being able to detect you. So we don't have that, is what I'm trying to say. We do have a defensive jammer on this one. And by the way, the Phantom for the Brits do not have a jammer at all. So so the Su-24 has one, but there is no actual jamming that we need to take care of. So all of that is to say that we can skip that step. It's an interesting step, and when we have to actually do that step, it's actually going to be quite time consuming. I'm not sure how exciting that step is, but there is it seems like there's some really good decision making. The thing I'm concerned about is that everything is in a 60-degree arc, and trying to determine 60-degree arcs on this, I mean, I know it's a 360-degree hex. I think every hex is 30 degrees. No, 30 degrees would point you Yeah, so let's play this out a little bit. Because we're going to have to figure this math out. Okay, so let's say I'm facing, this is 0, right? Let me zoom in a bit. That's 0. I think a 30-degree turn is to face the spine. That would be 30 degrees. And then 60 degrees would be to be flush with the next hex. So that would be 60 degrees. And so let's play this out because there's 360 all the way around. So 60, 60 more, that's 120, 180. Yeah, that sounds perfect because 180, we're now facing the opposite direction. And then it'll be 180 again to get to the front. So see, you can prove, you give yourself your own math proof. Okay, so a 60-degree arc, if I laid a token, let's say here, facing down the spine, I would assume would mean it's all the way up this and all the way up that. So it would be these two columns, or rows, or whatever you want to call them, these two lines of hexes, and then anything in between, of course. That's not too bad. I think we can handle that. But like I said, we skipped that phase. So this next phase we are not skipping. I think that's the whole point of this scenario. We're going to do the detection phase. So we roll to detect undetected flights. And that's, I love GMT, this part, because we know exactly where in a rule book to go to be able to do this phase. And all the rules I need are going to be there. And even if they aren't, they'll reference me to where else in the rule book I need to go. It's pretty good. One thing about defensive jamming, before I move on, I'm stating this for the record because I will forget it at some point, and I need you guys to remind me. Defensive jamming gets lost if they, we haven't gotten into the movement phase and talked about that yet, but if they don't do a free move and they do like a tighter turn, they lose their defensive, like there's a couple of ways that they can lose their defensive jamming. Now, if they still have movement points left, they can reobtain their defensive jamming. But there are ways that can cause them to lose their defensive jamming capability because they're moving too erratically or whatever. It's just going to make them too easy to spot. Okay, so we're going to roll to detect undetected flight, standard visual radar search, and EWR. Okay, so here's a couple of things. First off, standard detection. We'll look up what exactly that means. I'm assuming that means just all of our pieces have some level of radar, including our plane, our phantom. The visual, I can tell you from my memory, you have to be within 4 hexes to do a visual, so I don't think we're going to do that at this phase, but it's still part of this. Radar search, which is going to be, now this I think is our phantom, right? Because we have radar equipped on our phantom. So again, I need to figure out what standard means. EWR, we each have one, the Russians and the Americans. And then we resolve them. So I'm starting to feel excited because we're finally going to do something. So let me flip to that section of the rulebook, give it a quick pick, and I'll be right back. Okay, so detecting flights. Standard detection really is, for every plane, we just get to roll a die, and then we apply the modifier. So there's just a straight up standard detection that you do for every plane that's on the map. So that's an interesting thing, and we will definitely do that. But before we get into the dice rolling, the visual detection, I was correct, you have to be within 4, so there is no visual detection. And it's of a non-disordered friendly flight. So you have to be in a flight to visually detect. So the units on the ground won't be doing that. Then there's radar search detection, which is separate, and that's done by each plane. So radar search detection is this. And so see this little 16 here? That means 16 hexes is the range. And anything that's over 14 hexes, I'm going to get a penalty of -1 to my die roll. And this LD means that he's immune to what's called a look down penalty. I didn't even bother looking it up since he's immune. I just ignored it. But so like he would get to do another check, right? And this is for every plane that's within his radar range. Okay. Now 16 hexes, we can do some adding, but I think that might be a bit too far away. But it's also directional, meaning that the radar has to be, I think it has to be off of your cone. I don't think it just goes 360 degrees around the plane. And I'm so sorry, I got a little blurry there. But I'm looking on the other sheet here. So it's an AWG 12. It doesn't really say anything. Like, does the plane have to be facing? So here, let's look at this real quick. So you make an additional, choose an eligible flight. So it has to be within range. Oh, and the forward arc of a non-disordered radar equipment friendly flight. So yeah, what does an arc mean? I believe arc is 60 degrees. Let's, it does define what an arc is. It actually does, it even has pictures. So I know it's in here somewhere. All right, I'll pause until I find it. All right, I think I got the rest of this figured out. So the forward arc question is not in the rule book at all, which is why I couldn't find it. It is instead in a player aid, a very nice one, by the way. So you can see that if you're facing the spine, I don't know, what would you call it, an edge of a hex, the forward arc is basically along the spines, right? So you go along this spine, along that spine, and then just project it forward. That's the forward arc. And then if you're facing a spine, which is what this one is, then you can see it sort of splits down the middle of the two hex rows. And then if you're facing, how is this different? What the heck is the third scenario? Oh, that's where you're on a spine. Okay. So yeah, this is where you're inside of a hex facing a spine. This is where you're on a spine facing a hex. Then that's the most awkward one of all, but it pretty much just goes in the two rows that you see. And then of course the rear beam gets a little more interesting, like the forward beam and the rear beam and the stuff like that. However, the forward arc is the only thing that matters. Okay. So we know that range is 16. In terms of order, we're getting a little bit out of order, but I want to check to see if we're going to be able to do a plane radar check. There's a couple of issues, and we'll talk about those real quick. The first issue is we may need to retcon our setup because, as you can see, I put our plane facing this way. I could have just as easily put it right here, facing right down the spine, right? And then our forward arc would go out that way, right? So 16 hexes is a lot of hexes. So let's move this camera over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I made it to here, which isn't even the front line. So, and then they're way back there. So basically there's going to be no, first of all, my starting position is okay. There are going to be no worries about using radar for what we need to do. Okay, so let's get back to brass tacks here. We have a table. We have multiple tables, but this is the table that is important for us right now. Okay, couple of things. It says that the Russian player doesn't go on the map until turn 1. Technically, we're starting turn 1 right now. Are they on the map or are they not on the map? Like, do they not enter the map until movement? The rules in the scenario was not clear. If I was a playtester, I would have given that feedback. Like, it needed to be a little bit more clear. We're playing that it's on the map. Who cares if I'm wrong in this particular situation? Because this is all about just, this particular scenario is just about the mechanics. I mean, we're really just trying to detect each other and, you know, blah, blah, blah. All right, so this is the detection table. And if you recall, way over there, both Warsaw and NATO have a detection track of A. They're A on the detection track, which I said was the best. Because it is. Because A is this column here, and D means you detected the plane. And then over here you can see FGR2. This is our radar, if our plane's radar was in place. So it has some detection. It's not quite as good as normal detection. But we have some modifiers here, here, and here. And then, of course, there's jamming. And then, of course, there's other stuff that we'll get into. But for the normal detection, the Russians have 3. And NATO goes first. So we're going to do normal detection. And if you remember, the Russians are set up like this. And for example, we know that these two are the dummies and this one's the real one. So I'm going to go in this order. Okay, we're going to do dummy, regular, then dummy. Now, also just another reminder that since it's a solitaire game, per the rules, you're not supposed to play with dummies at all. There should only be one Russian plane on the map. But we're playing this like a 2-player schizophrenic kind of style, just because I want the extra experience, right, of trying to detect 3 planes, even though 2 of them are dummies. I may not do that in future scenarios, but for this one, we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so normal detection, A through F, right? We're doing A. It's a -1 or -2 for what, I always want to say West Point. Warsaw Pact, NATO flight at deck. Okay, I started them at deck because I wanted it to be a little bit harder. And after all, that's what they would do. I mean, why would they fly at high altitude? So they're going to get a -2 to their die roll. Well, actually a -1 because they're Warsaw. Okay. Then if it's at deck in rough or mountain, which is not the case, there is a chart here. It goes over the different terrain types. And the terrain type that it's currently in is the same as this, which is just land. Rough would be like a little bit yellow, and mountain, of course, would have some mountainous region. So, for example, coming over to here, they are in normal land. This would be considered rough, and then that's considered mountain. Okay? All right. So they're not going to get a modifier for that. Are they in a chaff corridor? I didn't even bother reading that part. It says 19.4. Chaff corridors, I'm pretty sure they're not in, because a chaff corridor, I think, is like a plane that that just drops chaff to just throw everything off. What did they say that was? 19.4. Flights tasked with escort jamming and standoff jamming or chaff laying. They're laden with chaff ordnance. They create chaff corridors. So, yeah, we don't have any of that going on. That's a very interesting concept. And then standoff spot jamming. Okay, so this is a negative modifier if they had a jammer, which they don't. It's a max of 6, only applies to EWR searches. So their jamming blocks EWR. It doesn't block normal detection. Okay, so the EWR search is where this happens. Like I said, there's no standoff for spot jamming at all. So we do, however, reduce the negative. So they have a 3 in their jammer, defensive jammer. So they do get a 3. Now, why doesn't it show that on here? Am I just supposed to know to apply a 3 to that? That's really bizarre. You would think they would put that in the, you know, just as a reminder that, yeah, you get to apply your defensive jammer modifier. So it says, both players roll 2 dice for each undetected enemy flight. Consult the detection table, use the column corresponding to the detection level, and apply any of the listed modifiers. Oh, defensive jammer is only used against aircraft radar. Detected enemy flights with defensive jamming capability must be indicated to other player. If jamming is lost for any reason, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't explain when the defensive jamming changes the, so here, like range to target, none of these use the defensive jamming. It's so bizarre. Like, why would they go through all this trouble to explain what defensive jamming is and then... All right, I'm going to read this one more time. I will pause so you don't have to watch me be confused. Okay, I found the answer almost immediately after I hit pause. Defensive jamming is for defense against an attack, like a SAM attack, SAM acquisition. So like, here, if I put this down, you can see right here, defensive jamming is in there for SAM defense. So like, you know, defense against SAMs, I think it's, yeah, right here, defensive jamming strength is used for SAM acquisition. And maybe not necessarily for the attack, but basically defensive jamming is in there when it's supposed to be. So we were just looking in the wrong section. And then of course it covers like how you lose jamming, etc. So that means there's no defensive jammer for detection. It's only for whenever you're trying to like launch a missile and attack. So it's jamming the attack. I guess that makes sense. Okay, so let's, without further ado, let's get going here. So we're going to roll 3 times. Remember, the first one's the dummy on the north, then the actual plane, and then the dummy on the south. And yes, I know that which one's the dummy, but we're going to pretend like we don't. I'm going to roll 2d10 here, and then we just consult the chart. So let's get the roll in first for the first one. And that is a 14. I'm assuming this is a 10. Yeah, that would be a 10. So that's a 14. That's a really nice roll. Okay, so 14, it is at deck, so we're going to -1, so that's 13. It's not in a rougher mountain. It's not a chaff corridor. That's it. So we go to 13. And D, that means we detected the first plane. So by detecting it, we would flip it over. And I've got to pick up the camera here. So what that means, oops, so sorry. So this one actually was on the detected side. This is the undetected side. It gets flipped over to detected. However, it's a dummy, so the player has to reveal that this was a dummy, and then it just gets removed. So we effectively eliminated one of the dummies already. So that's pretty good. So now we're going to roll again for the next one. And this time I got an 8, which is not going to be enough, because you can see that a 8 or less is no detection. So we didn't detect the actual plane. And then the third one, I got a 10, which is pretty good. It gets reduced to a 9, and that's enough to detect it. So 9 is a D. So this A-level detection is really good. So I actually detected both of the dummies, so they're both already eliminated from the game. So the whole concept of using dummies in this game is already gone. So then they get to do the same on us. So we're also at deck. So they rolled an 11, which is a good roll. We get to do a -2 because we're at deck and we're not in Rougher Mountain. So that puts us to a 9, and a 9 is detected. So our plane got detected. So the way that normally goes is this would become this. And now remember, with the solitaire rules, you would just simply do this becomes that. So I don't know what the value is of having, so basically this means you've detected something's here, you just don't know what it is. And I believe visual identification will let you figure out the exact plane. For example, so for regular detection, if the detected flight is a dummy, remove it from the map. So we did that part. If there's no effect, it remains undetected. If the detected flight is a dummy, remove it. In addition, players may make visual detection attempts, radar, blah, blah, blah. So for the visual detection, like I said, you have to be within 4. Yeah, I think it says over, so here, visual identification. Flights use generic flight counters until they are visually identified. This is what I'm referring to. At which point you replace them with the actual flight counter. So again, in solitaire mode, none of this is necessary because you already know who's what and where. So basically the designer's not trying to, you're being schizophrenic enough already by playing both sides. He's not trying to force you to pretend that you don't know it's there when you know it's there. So well done, designer. I really appreciate that part. But this is where, if you do visually identify, this is how it transitions from, the little generic number to the actual name pilot. So we'd have to do visual. Flights are usually identified the instant any of the following occurs. A flight enters standard air-to-air combat. A non-disordered enemy flight is within 1 hex, has line of sight, is within altitude band of your flight, right? Because you have your own flight that's visually. An enemy AAA or SAM or enemy ground unit is within 1 hex and has line of sight. So if we never visually identify him, when he comes to take a picture of us, we're going to for sure identify him because he's going to fly within 1 space of a ground unit. And actually, his waypoint is flying within 1 space of our tank. So we're going to visually identify him automatically because of that. If I would have known that, I probably wouldn't have put his waypoint right next to the tank like that. But that's one of the ways you visually identify them. And then it says that visually identified dummies are removed from the map, as usual. Okay, so we did that. They detected us. So they know where we are, even though they don't know what we are, although they do. Because this scenario only has 1 plane each. The next thing is the EWR. So the EWR attempt is the same. In fact, it uses the same table even. It's just that it's a different column. So EWR attempts are right here. And it uses the same exact modifiers, except the standoff and spot jamming would apply. But the EWR is column B, so it's slightly degraded. So the only detection that hasn't been done yet is them. So we're going to roll to see if we detect them. They don't need to roll to see if they detect us. And I rolled a 10 this time, and we know that they're on deck, so they get a -1. So we got a 9. We detected them as well. Okay, so everybody is detected. It's just a giant Oprah fest. Everybody just got a new car. So with that said, come back over. And we flip this guy over to show he's been detected. Now, at the end of every round, they can become undetected again. So that's some of the cat and mouse of this, is that just because you detected somebody doesn't mean you keep a lock on them the whole time. Okay, so that was a lot of time spent on this particular topic, but I think this was an important one, and I'm sort of glad we have a simple scenario, because it took me a long time to get through it. And then obviously as we get onto the more complicated ones, that'll make it a bit easier to do. Okay, so for the movement phase here, this is where we enter or exit our defensive wheels, which a defensive wheel is just simply, it's a way that you can't be ambushed. So you're basically, because remember, every flight represents multiple planes. So you're basically flying in a wheel where, you know, somebody's covering each other's back the whole time. We roll to determine initiative. 1 to 6 is NATO, so let's do that. I rolled a 7. So this is where, so the Warsaw Pact has initiative. So since they have initiative, they could choose to go first or choose to make the NATO go first. So that's what initiative lets you do. So basically it's almost like in NFL football. You get to decide who does the kickoff. So we're going to draw initiative chits. Small pool with less than 9 flights, which it is. Flights move in initiative order. And then during movement, flights may engage. AAAs and SAMs may fire. Air-to-ground attacks take place, etc. Then we do a fuel phase, a SAM location phase, and that's an interesting one. I thought we already had them located, but I'll have to look up what that means. And then the tracking phase is whether or not we still have them detected. If not, they become undetected. And then SAM acquisition is at the end. So as much as we can do SAM attacks up here, the acquisition occurs later. So I don't think there's any actual attacks we can do during this phase. This is a very large phase, and we're 37 minutes in already. But a couple of things. The first one, how many movement points do we have? So we have this chart here, and you can see that if we're at a high altitude, I believe it's 5, 4, and 4. This 7, 6, and 5, I believe, is if you're an afterburner. I don't know if that's what they call it, but that's basically what that means. And I'm just opening up the original chart. So it basically says, yeah, it's 445. Oh, dash is what they call it. It's not afterburner, it's called dash. Dash is 567. And then there is a maneuver number of 5, 6, and 6, which I believe is what this is. So that's for NATO. And then, of course, for the Russians, it's 544 as well. They're very similar planes. Okay, so the Russians, let's say, you know, they're going to force the Americans to go first. So what you would do is you have, oh, I'm sorry I'm making so much noise. You have these chits. There's not a lot of them. So you just draw from them. And the SM, the red number, stands for small. And then this is for large. So you use this if there's 9 or more flights. We have 1 flight each. And then what this says is you're activating 1 unit, okay? Just to give you a brief idea of how this is, you might be thinking, well, this is silly to draw chits, but you can actually draw a 0. Which means like if the Americans drew a 0, then that means the Russians would draw. And if they drew a 2, that means the Russians would end up moving first, even though they gave the initiative to the Americans. Now, one more rule. In solitaire, the rulebook says you can ignore the zeros just to speed up the game. And that is, of course, entirely up to you. But if you're playing this full blower, just understand there's some zeros that can be drawn, and this is for small, so it goes up to 3, it looks like. So at most, you're going to be required to move 3 units. Most cases here, it looks like you're going to be moving 1 or 2. And so let's say we had 4 units on the board. What we would do is we would move, let's say, 2 of them. And then after we move those 2, the Russians then draw, and let's say they move 2, right? And so then we just go back and forth until everybody has moved at least once. So that part's easy. The part that's not so easy is, okay, now we got to get into movement and how does movement work, all that good fun. So let me pause, get to the section of the rulebook we need to get to so we can talk about movement a little more detailed. Basically, I don't understand, so the Americans are, let's flip over to the other camera. So you can see on the left side there's a orbital, and then you can see our flight is behind the orbital there. We're required to stay with the orbital until, I actually think it's until we detect them. So maybe we can move. All right, so for victory conditions, detection and visual identification of the flight. We have not done that. We detected it, but we haven't visually identified. So nothing there. Over here, NATO restriction. It's always, they've got rules everywhere. The NATO cap flight must remain within 1 hex of the orbit point unless a Warsaw Pact flight has been detected and is in a hex on the NATO side of the front. So they're not on the NATO side yet. That is our issue. Okay. So, so as far as movement goes, I know I was going to pause, but a lot of this is pretty straightforward. Let's. The problem is they're giving me 2 sections to look at here. 1143, which that's a defensive wheel. We're not going to get into that. 7.11. Sorry, I know I should have paused. And now I'm having issues getting the page to turn. Okay. Well, so that's entering defensive wheels. That's not what I want. We just want to do movement. Okay, so let me find the right section for movement, and then we'll be in business here. Okay, it was just 1 page before. So movement it's fairly straightforward. Basically, they got some nice diagrams to show the different ways you can move. And then you have what's called turns. And then there's a free turn, and then there's a not a free turn. That's the part where it gets a little wonky. So let's first start with altitude. So you can see there's a whole bunch of different altitudes that you can have. We are both at deck altitude at the moment. Okay, so movement points, they get a certain number of movement points. It lists the maximum speed values in 2 columns. And just to give you a side-by-side, the 2 columns that they're talking about is here and here. This is the dash, and that's the not dash. So, and then this LD just means that it's low or deck. It can be further limited by ordnance, which we don't have to worry about. To move a flight, first decide whether to use combat or dash throttle, right? and then announce the flight's total movement points, and then make your move. If combat throttle is selected, which is dash, announce the movement points equal to the maximum combat speed, or one less than this number. A flight speed may never be less than 1. I'm sorry, combat throttle, and then I guess this is the dash throttle down here. Announce the movement points between the combat and dash speeds, and maximum dash speeds inclusive. Flights with crippled aircraft may not select dash. So when it's your turn to move, you can move 1 hex, you can turn up to your maximum turn value, and you may freely descend 1 altitude band when you do a turn. On entering a hex, you may do one or both of the following. You can make a free turn up to the allowance indicated on the turntable, or freely descend 1 altitude band. So, the turntable. Where the heck is that? I think. Here we go. Turntable. So, if it's daytime and you're only moving 1 to 2 movement points, you can turn 90 degrees. So, if you're moving more than 9, you can't turn at all because you're basically mavericking it to wherever you need to go. You're hightailing it. So, the max turn in altitude band is 30, 90, 120, 180. Because here's the thing, and this is what I love. This is really nice, so I don't have to keep the rule book in front of me all the time. So during movement, first thing you do is remove markers, which we don't have any. Then we can move 1 hex straight ahead, and then here's the one or both of the following. So the same thing I was just reading from the rule book. Okay, I really love this. Okay, so then we can turn. That costs a movement point to do, but you can do a turn, and then this is the turn range here. And then you may freely descend if you do that. Climbing is an actual movement point, to just climb 1 altitude. On completing the climbing action, you can do a free turn. And then if you want to climb again, it's going to cost you 2 movement points. So, but you can do that if you want to do that. And then if you declared anti-radar tactics, you can't do that. You can dive to any lower altitude, and then on completing it, you may make a free turn. Flights may climb or dive more than once, but never expend movement points to climb and dive in the same hex. So you just can't go up and down. So this player aid actually eliminates our need to have that rulebook open. So let's talk real quick about what it means to move, turn, all that good stuff. So let's take a little Ruski here, Gulayev. And I'm going to zoom in a bit and just move him up here. So in this situation, he can just move, which means he moves to another hex. And then depending on the amount of movement points he spends, he can turn up to a free turn. So if he's moving 9 or more spaces, that's all he can do. If he was moving only 1 or 2, he can actually turn 90 degrees, like that. If he was moving, 5 to 8, he can only turn 30 degrees, which means he could turn like that. Now, one of the other things, that would cost him just 1 movement point to do. So let's say he moves and then he turns 30 degrees, because we're going to go 5 spaces. Then he can move again, and he goes right along the spine. Okay, so that's 2, and now he's going to turn 30 degrees again. What we could do is we could actually turn 30 degrees this way. So now we're facing, so we're on the spine, but we're facing that way again. It's really goofy, I know. So now he's moving, let's see, he was on that spine, so he'd be on this spine. So then what he's going to do now is he's going to just move along that spine. So he just goes from this spine over to that spine for a third movement. So let's do 30 degrees again. And this time he's, gonna turn like that. So now he would move into the hex for his fourth movement. And then if you want to do a fifth movement, he can move out. So the spine is almost like its own little movement point, like its own little location. So to move off a spine into a hex, that's, he can, he's on the spine, he moves 30 degrees. Actually, that's more than 30 degrees to go that way. So how could he get off the spine? That's what I'm trying to think of. Oh, right here. He would just go forward, and now he's off the spine. And so what he's doing is he's facing a spine again, but now he can rotate 30 degrees, and now he's facing the edge. Sorry about that. He turned too sharply. So here we go. We're going to start here. We're going to move 1, turn 30 degrees. We're on the spine. 2, turn 30 degrees. We're on the spine again. And then 3, to move on to the next spine. Okay, then we're going to turn 30 degrees. Or no, we're not going to turn at all. And then 4, now we're in this hex and we're facing the spine. And we're going to turn 30 degrees. And then 5. That would be an example of movement. He could have just done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you wanted. But these turns and all this stuff you can do as part of your free movement. He could also have done 1, and let's say he wanted to turn more than 30 degrees because he wants to go this way. He would then do 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5 if you wanted to straighten out again. Right? That's another way to do that. The amount you can turn, if you're only moving 5 spaces, is 90 degrees. So he could move 1, and then he can turn a whole 90 degrees, and then went along the spine for 2. Then turn 90 degrees again, and then enter the hex for 3, and then 4, and then 5. So the important thing is just that the spine and the hex they're two different things. So if you're riding along the spine and you're turning into a hex, then it's going to use a point to go into the hex. It's not like you're, because you are sort of halfway in this hex, halfway in that one. So you'd use a movement point to finish entering the hex, and then another movement point to get out. Now, I just said that, so let me make sure I said that correctly, but I believe I did. For purposes of a flight occupying a hex site occupies both hexes sharing that hex. Attacks against this flight can be made into either hex. That's the one thing about going on the spine, is that if somebody wants to attack you, if you're on the spine, they can attack you here or here, and you're considered to be in both hexes for the purposes of being attacked. Yeah, it doesn't show. Oh, I see. So it's showing like, okay, so if you're on this spine and you turn 30 degrees this way, you just end up in the hex. That's what it's saying. So your free turn would just put you in the hex. So you're only on that spine if you're actually facing along the spine. The moment you turn off the spine, you actually go into the hex. So please scratch what I just explained. So going back to this scenario, you would go 1, turn, 2, turn, and then 3, turn, 4, and let's say we're going along the spine, 5 would end you on the spine. And if you turn on that one, so let's say we turn this way, then we would end up in the hex. So that's an interesting thing. So please, just one last time, if you're on the spine and you turn while you're on the spine, you're just going to simply end up in one of the hexes that you're sort of riding between. That's what it's saying. That's a 30-degree turn. Obviously, if you do more than a 30-degree turn, so let's say you do a 90-degree turn, which would put you this way, you would still end up in the hex. It's just you'd be more, your turn. So a 30-degree turn, for example, would put you here, and then that would be 60, and then that would be 90. All right? So I apologize for explaining that wrong. So Americans go first. We drew a 1. They are not on our side of the front line. So, oh my goodness. I just realized I went through all this explanation while I had the wrong camera on. This is where I wish I had editing, and I'm so sorry, folks. Oh man, I feel so bad. Okay. Let's go through it again. I'm so sorry. I feel really bad. Somebody put a note on when to skip and denote this time. Like, just jump ahead to here so you can see the actual movement rules. I really apologize so very much. I had the other camera on and you didn't see anything I did. So basically, let's say I have 5 movement points. This guy. So 1 movement point would take me to there. If I'm facing a spine, a movement point would move me onto the spine. And then of course if I'm facing, so this is me facing an edge. And then if I'm on a spine, it would take a movement point to go into the hex. Now anytime you do movement, you get free turns, which is what we're talking about. So if you're here, a 30-degree turn would point you towards the spine. Another 30 degrees, so now you're at 60, would go there, and then 90 would go that way, then 120, 150, 180. Okay? So with 5 movement points, you get a free 30-degree turn. So we could go 1, turn. That's free. 2, now I want to turn 30 degrees again. So I'm in between both of these. This is what I'm talking about. So now I'm going to turn. So let's say I'm going to turn again to the right. Then what would happen is I would actually fall into this hex and then turn to face this edge. So that would be 2. So 1, turn, 2, turn. Okay? 3, no turn. 4, turn. And then 5, I'm going to turn again and then face that way. So that's how movement works. So I apologize so much. I had the wrong camera up. I make that mistake from time to time. It's why I sometimes don't like using 2 cameras. But now with that being said, now we're going to flip to the other camera for real. Okay, so we get here. This is our guy. So we're at deck level. And at deck level, you can see here we have 4 movement points. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to do 4. So we're going to go 1. And also at deck level, at moving 4, we get 60-degree free turns. So 1, and then I'm going to turn 60 degrees for free. A 30-degree would be along the spine. 60-degree, we're going to face this edge. 2, 60 degrees. 3, and then I'm going to do 30 degrees. Well, yeah, we're just going to stop there at 3. Yeah, I guess I'll do 30 degrees and face the spine. I can't leave, so there's nothing that I can do. All right. So all that for that. Okay, now let's go to the Russian plane, which is over here off the other camera. He's also at deck level. And his movement is also 4. If we want to put him in afterburner, we could and make him move 5, but I don't see any reason to do that. So we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, right along the spine. We're just going straight. We do eventually need to go up to hit that weight point. And in fact, remember, you get free visual ID if you fly within one space. So we're going to put the waypoint 1 higher, so that way we don't get visually identified. That's just something that now that I know the game, I would never have put it there. So we literally just went straight 4 spaces. That's a whole freaking turn right there. Okay, so from a movement perspective, we're more or less done. Just a couple other things. Like, you can do stacking temporarily, but you can't finish your move in a stack. So that's one of the things. Excuse me. There are a couple other things too. We're flying at deck altitude, but when we get to mountain terrain, you can't be at deck unless you have terrain following radar, which actually they have. So see that TFR at the bottom? That's terrain following radar. So the Russians have it. So he can stay at deck level all the way through if he wants. The Phantom, however, can't. We're going to have to go higher than deck level once we get to the mountainous terrain. If there was some kind of battle or some kind of avoidance thing, when you're flying that low, you're going to have to do a check to see if you crash into the ground, which of course is bad news. Very, very bad news. So we don't want to do that. So I think that's about it as far as movement goes. Now let's check back with the movement phase. It says SAMs and AAAs may fire. Okay, so a couple of things. And I'm just going to use a local map here so we're not zooming in way up there. This is a AAA light flak, and it has a range of 1 all around it. So if we ever fly within range, the player can turn this on, and it basically will flak the whole area. That hits friendlies too, so you have to be careful about that. But whenever it says that AAAs may fire, that's what we're talking about. Then the SAMs may fire as well. Now that one I'm a little more confused about because there's an acquisition phase that occurs later. So I think we have to have acquisition before we can do actual SAM firing. But that's the part I will look up next. There are there's taking off and landing at airports. There's stuff like that. It actually takes 2 game turns to take off. There's like all kinds of stuff that we're not, dealing with here when it comes to taking off and landing at airports. Now, the one thing about landing at airports is like you may need to refuel. So that's something I'm not sure we're going to run into, but that is the next phase after this. It says at the end of the phase, flights at deck on enemy side or front are subject to automatic small arms attack, which we're not on the enemy side of the front, so we don't get automatic small arms attack either. So next up, let's get this in front of you. The fuel phase. Okay, flights that use dash throttle or engage in air-to-air combat, note the fuel usage on their flight logs. So we didn't do either. Recover aircraft that have left the map. So 2.9, 20.1. Let me check those real quick to make sure there's nothing buried in the rules, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so nothing applies to us because we didn't move at dash speed, but this is the amount of fuel that you have on your flight. So we have 10, and that's game turns. However, let's say we moved at dash speed and we engage in air-to-air combat, you would actually use 2 units of fuel in 1 turn. So don't think of this as we have 10 turns of fuel. Right now we use 0 of the fuel. We're going to be wrapping up turn 1 here. We use 0. If I use this dash here, then it uses 1. And then if I use get into air-to-air combat, that uses another 1. So, or if I only use 1 of them, then of course they each only expend 1. The point is I only have 10 units. And then it says you can expend more than 10, but then you run the risk of having to be recovered, crashing. So that's the thing with the fuel. And it's a really small section. It's only 1 paragraph. And then you would have to do a recovery roll, which I'm assuming is what happens at the end of a scenario. You would have to be, if the flight fuel point allowance has been exceeded, then you have to do a recovery roll. So that's the part that would cause you to possibly lose your plane. I don't really know what the full ramifications are. I didn't read all that in entirety. Just trying to explain what this phase is. So next is the SAM location phase, which is 15.13. And I don't know we do anything here because we know where all the SAMs are located. Because there could be dummy SAMs when you're playing against another player. So that's why the SAM location phase is a bit of a deal. But it says 15.13, and there is, oh, here we go, 15.13, SAM location. So in this phase, both players try to locate unlocated SAM markers. Roll for each unlocated SAM within line of sight on the SAM detection range of a flight. Increase the range by 5 if there's a SAM launch marker on the SAM, blah, blah, blah. There are the possibility of dummy SAM sites and dummy radars. Remember, in a solitaire game, these don't exist, so you sort of don't do these. So if you're playing solitaire, you may never use these rules. And then, of course, when you're playing with a real person, you're going to have to dig out the rule book and read these 2 sections. We're going to skip SAM location because we know where all the SAMs are located, so there's nothing to do. And in fact, I'm not sure we ever have to locate. That's an interesting conundrum there. Do SAMs start the game undetected, even though we know where they are? I didn't read that anywhere. That's the part that we have to do recon, and we know exactly which hex to go to. Okay, let me do some reading and get back. Okay, so I apologize. I took a very large break here. I don't even remember why I paused originally, but I know we were at the SAM location phase, and I just can't remember if I said that we skip it or don't. We do skip it. Basically, long story short, there's in this scenario, there's an ISR phase, which is like an intelligence something reconnaissance. So every player is allowed to have like hidden SAMs or they're undetected SAMs. Like they have an actual location, but they're undetected. And you would actually put like a little warning symbol. I don't know where that warning symbol is. I would have to find it. But basically the warning symbol would, basically the other player knows there's a SAM there, but they can't necessarily attack it in certain situations unless that SAM finally gets detected, if you will. So there's a lot of that cat and mouse going on. And then there's the whole concept of completely hidden SAM. So you have like a SAM log that you keep where you write down the hex that it's located and what density it is. So, so for example, a certain AAA, you have light flak, medium flak, heavy flak. You may have a certain density AAA somewhere, and it's hidden. And this is the phase where those would be detected. And it does use a SAM detection table, which I think is, it could be this. I'd have to look it up. I'm just reiterating the things that I just finished reading, and basically, long story short, we definitely don't do that in this scenario. All the SAMs are located and detected in this scenario. So with that said, let's move on to the next phase, which is the track phase. So all detected NATO flights at deck and rough terrain and mountain terrain and all helicopters, they automatically become undetected. Then both players roll in the track table to determine whether other detected enemy flights, if any, become undetected. So for whatever reason, NATO has a really huge advantage that if they're flying at deck, this is in rough terrain, all flights at deck in or adjacent to mountain terrain and all helicopter cruise missile flights at deck automatically become undetected. So let's flip back over to our other camera. So the so right here we are on we're on rough terrain right now. So let me reread this. We are at rough terrain, so we automatically become undetected. So this flips over again, and then flipping back to the other camera. We are next to rough terrain with the Soviets. So let me just make sure, because it says that only the NATO flights at rough terrain get this bonus. All flights at deck and or in adjacent to mountain terrain, which that is not adjacent to mountain terrain. So the Soviet one does not become undetected. So now we have to do, we roll on the track table to determine whether other detected enemy flights become undetected. So the track table is this thing. So let's roll first, see what we get, and then we'll try to understand this table. So I rolled a 14. Okay, so the table itself is this guy, right? So a 14 here, we're at detection level A, a 14 is blank. So flip all detected flights of the rolled suits to their undetected side. Results in curly brackets apply to any flight in the deck. All detected NATO flights at deck. Yeah, this is repeating what we already had. So the one thing I don't know is, okay, what does a blank mean? So let me look that up. Okay, so the blank result is no effect, which means it stays detected. So if we would have rolled, let's say, a heart, and that token had a heart on it, then he would become undetected. So if you match what they have, then it becomes undetected. And then this little squirrely brackets is for when they're at the deck level. So this would be no effect, but if they're at deck level, then they would become undetected if they match. That's what this means. So it makes sense once you look it up in the rules. It actually makes a whole lot of sense. Okay, so let's keep going. So now we do the SAM acquisition phase. So switch on SAM radar is attempting quick acquisition. Okay, this is if they're off. So you can like switch them on to try to get quick acquisition. I don't think we need to do that because all of ours are on. SAM units attempt to acquire or maintain acquisition in 1521 and then result any attacks that was made up here in the movement phase, which there weren't any. So for SAM acquisition, they must acquire their target flight on radar. The exception is LOAL, which is this type. Okay, so the LOAL at the bottom. Infrared SAMs, anti-radar SAMs before they can fire. In the SAM acquisition phase, a SAM may make one attempt to acquire one enemy flight or maintain and improve one existing acquisition on one flight, provided the flight is within its acquisition range. So what would the acquisition range here is 13. Okay, so our SAMs are a little bit closer. So we'll do a quick check, but I don't think we're within 13 to be able to do this. So yeah, let's do a quick check. The closest SAM we have is this guy right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Only gets us to here. And then if I move the camera over, this is where the Soviet is. So we're still nowhere near them. Okay, that was a really long turn one, but a lot of this is just because it's new. I mean, to be quite honest, the only thing that needed to be done was initiative. Americans moved 4 spaces, he moved 4 spaces. Did we detect each other? We're done. That could have been done in 10 minutes. Once you know the rules and are very comfortable with what needs to be done. So I went through everything. Well, actually, no, I didn't go through everything. There's the admin phase. So here we roll for disorder recovery, split flights, which we're not going to do. Remove shutdown markers. That's if your SAM station is shut down. Switch radar on or off. We're leaving all of ours on. Switch SAM radars, etc. Move the mobile SAMs. Put on the different markers. Make flights ready. Parachute. Yeah, we don't do anything here. We just go to turn 2. So that's what we would do. We move to turn 2, and then I'm going to go ahead and end the video. So I think we're going to, I tried to go through every section, even if it doesn't apply, and give like a basic overview of what it does. I'm starting to feel a lot more comfortable with this game rule set. I still don't have it all memorized. There's a whole bunch of looking up and table lookups. I'm at my limit with it. Like if it had more of this, I would get a little upset. I do like the fact that I have control over, for example, I have control over where I move. I have control over some aspects of this game. So it's not just a roll and see what happens to me. I think that the way the radars and everything interact with each other, it's really complex. And I'm sure that it's to make it accurately represent the time. And gosh darn it, if we did a modern era one, it'd probably be even worse. I just don't know, like this game seems to be 90% about radar acquisition and all that. But I mean, it's a plane game. I mean, what do you expect? That's really what aerial interaction involves, is the ability to electronically identify the enemy and to countermeasure them when they're trying to identify you. So I can't complain. I really can't. It's not a game for everybody, though. Like the DVG Leader series is very abstract. I can appreciate why some people think it's too abstract, especially if you play a game like this. This game is really in the weeds. With that being said, if you take it slow, like I just did, it's not bad. This was an hour and 18-minute long video. This is with me explaining things, stuff like that. But just so you know, I spent 3 hours recording this. All the times I hit pause to go look something up. This was a 3-hour night for me to make a 1-hour playthrough. And I think I feel pretty good about everything I explained. I mean, I know I explained the movement wrong because I had this camera up instead of the correct one. So there's probably a 10-minute blurb there that you can cut out. But anyways, as always, thank you for watching. I really do enjoy this theme. I love aerial combat. I'm very fascinated with it. And it's really funny because when I was younger and Top Gun came out, I really thought it was a crappy movie. I know it's probably blasphemy to say, but it had too much love story, and they sing the song, do 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 do, and it's just like, I don't know, it was just a bit too cheesy. Frankly, I think it would have been better if it was more about actual air-to-air combat. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But anyways, I know I have 2 cousins that are in the Air Force Academy, or they went to the Air Force Academy and then served in the Air Force. And Top Gun was actually the movie that really inspired them to get into it. So I do have family members that have been in the Air Force. It's something that it's very interesting to me. I really enjoy all the DVG Leader games. I have a lot of computer games that deal with it. This game is definitely intense. What I'm worried about, I guess my final conclusion is, this is one of those games that if you put it on the shelf for 6 months, I'm not going to want to get it off the shelf because I know how much effort it's going to take to get back into it and figure it out all over again. That's my concern about games like this. I like owning games where even if I put it on the shelf for 6 months, I can get it out, and with a little bit of effort, I can play it again. Enemy Action Ardennes is one of those games that has been on my shelf for a year now since I played. It's been a full year, and I've wanted to play it again, actually. It's just that the amount of effort, I feel like I would be starting all over again. It's just, that's the kind of feeling I have. Again, the player aids are top-notch. GMT, other than the paper mat, everything about this is top-notch. The tokens are really tiny. I'm actually still thinking of moving to Vassal because I think some things would go quicker if we were on Vassal. I think I would be able to show the map better and the units moving around a little bit better. Vassal also has everything hidden. Like if you're looking for a particular chit or piece of cardboard, you got to know exactly which menu in Vassal to find it in. That's been my hesitation with using Vassal. But also, when you're playing board games, there's nothing better than the feel of the cardboard. And then, these cards that I purchased, they look very cool and they are super handy to have. Now, do you have to have it? No. It just means you're going to use, something like this, which has a whole bunch of stuff on here that you're not even using in your scenario. Anyways, I'm rambling a little bit, so thank you for joining me at the table. I hope you like this so far. As far as I understand, no one has done an actual playthrough of this game. I am aware of a couple videos that go over some basic concepts, but that's one of the reasons why I'm taking this game on. I really believe this is a good game that deserves a playthrough. So anyways, let's see what we can do. Turn 2 in the next video. Thanks for watching. Stay awesome.